life is.
Time is now 7 a.m. and we now make way for the Morning Watch.
Listeners to Love 101 FM are advised that the views and opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of Love 101 FM.
Welcome to the Morning Watch on Love 101 FM. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. A special welcome to our listeners on love101.org. And if you are overseas and on the move, U.S. listeners can access us at 712-832-8001. And if you are in the UK, 0330-332-6541, or join us via the Love 101 FM app that can be downloaded from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. You can also join us on Love 101 FM Facebook and YouTube Live in the first watch today. The Cuba Health Program and Jamaica, in good shape or not? And in second watch, examining the opposition's contribution to the 2025-26 budget debate. For our social media question, we ask, what should be the country's response to the USA the Cuban Health Program? Share your responses on our Love 101 FM Facebook page and YouTube channel, and also on WhatsApp 876-997-3125 using the hashtag The Morning Watch. We'll share your responses later on the program, but first, as I quote.
All right, this I quote says, the harder the wall, the better the bounce back. And this one is from Pastor Junior Tucker.
And I assume they mean the Junior Tucker from
That's
Jamaica.
Right, the one and only.
Well, it's an interesting I quote. The harder the wall, the better the bounce, better the bounce back.
That's right.
Good morning, Jacal.
Good morning, good morning.
The first watch will be back after this break.
In the next Campus Connection, we'll be focusing on healthy life balance. A healthy life balance involves finding the right equilibrium between work, personal life, and well-being, encompassing physical, mental, and social health, and allowing for time for rest, hobbies, and relationships. You are invited to join the conversation with Shadeen Williamson, teacher of food, nutrition, and health at Port Antonio High School, and Loretta Dawes Collins, educator and justice of the peace. And don't miss our creative blog guest, Ornesia Williams Blackstock, event host, public speaking coach, and entrepreneur. Campus Connection is brought to you by Heart NSTA Trust. Scale is power. That's Campus Connection, Tuesday, March 18 at 5:30 p.m. Only on the family station, Love 101.
Revelation 1 verse 14 describes Jesus' hair as being white like wool, as white as snow. Is this literally or figuratively so? Does like wool suggest that Jesus also had dark skin and eyes? Daniel also described Jesus as having hair like wool. But yet, we still think of it as symbolism. Does he have to have one specific color, or can he be the color we each see him as? Tuesday, March 18, on The Rock. Join guests Pastor Dane Wilson and Pastor Sylvan Carr as they discuss the topic, Jesus, red, yellow, black, or white. That's The Rock, Tuesday, March 18 at 10 a.m. right here on the family station, Love 101.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. We are in the first watch now. Caribbean countries, or some Caribbean country heads, have laid their cards and even their visas on the table. Jamaica is said to yet make a commitment either way, as neither of the two major political parties have given any statements in terms of the recent position of what is said to be the US position in relation to certain countries or various countries continuing to use doctors from Cuba. And of course, Jamaica being no exception. And is it a difficult decision for a country like Jamaica to make? How does the Cuban medical personnel in Jamaica, what is their reaction to all of this? And how do persons in Jamaica as a whole feel about the issue? We have as guests this morning to discuss the matter, we have in studio Osvaldo Cardenas, President of the Association of Cuban Residents in Jamaica, and we have online Joseph Patterson, President of the United Independence Congress, Jamaica's third political party, otherwise referred to as UIC. Good morning, Mr. Patterson, and good morning, Senor Cardenas.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Patterson, of course, sir. Now, a little bit of context, because we know that we use a lot of doctors in Jamaica from Cuba, but I can't help but notice some things that I see online. There are, in fact, allegations, and very serious allegations, of human trafficking in medical missions. In fact, it is alleged, or so alleged, by the Human Rights Foundation. And in the USA, there is what I see as described as Bill S-2138. Of course, I don't practice in the US, so I can't speak to, whether it's enforced, not enforced, if it's being, I can't speak to that detail. But I see reference to Bill S-2138, and the name of the legislation is combating, or the name of the bill as they call it, Combating Trafficking of Cuban Doctors Act of 2021. And it is even alleged that in some countries where Cuban doctors go to work, that the wages or the salaries of the doctors are garnished by the Cuban government and is used to ultimately fund the Cuban military. I found that quite interesting. So against the backdrop of that, I don't know if you have any opening thoughts, Mr. Patterson, in relation to,
Sure.
Of course, we use doctors here, and we have used them here for decades now, I think. Or yes, it is a fact, for decades now. But then there are these allegations.
Yeah, I
Mr.
think
Patterson.
the allegations are serious allegations, and there might be some merit to those allegations. However, it is also a fact that the Jamaican government has been depending on Cuba for medical missions for many, many years now. And it's unfortunate that our country is not at a state where we're able to provide our own doctors and nurses, given the opportunity that we have to do so, because many of our nurses have left Jamaica to work elsewhere. But barring that, the Cuban government is a communist socialist government. And we know that the people of Cuba do not enjoy the level of freedom that we enjoy here in Jamaica. So these allegations may have some merit, but at the same time, one has to look at the humanitarian aspect of the situation. That should we have an abrupt end to the arrangement in place right now, that the Jamaican people are the ones who stand to suffer greatly in the short term. Now, in the long term or medium term, we need to come to grips with why we have not been able to train and retain our own doctors and nurses. And CARICOM needs to look at the matter closely as to why we have not been able to, as a region, outside of Cuba, be able to provide enough nurses and doctors outside of a socialist communist country, providing it for the rest of us.
And before we have Senor Cardenas comment, Mr. Cardenas comment, I want to raise another issue with you, Mr. Patterson. that is, if we continue to use Cuban doctors, and I mean, let us, for argument's sake, say, Mr. Patterson, that you are, of course, the president of the UIC. You are a potential or might one day become the president of Jamaica. So if we continue to use Cuban doctors, how might that reality affect our position or our status in terms of the trafficking in persons index? Because we know how relevant such a thing is to a country like Jamaica in terms of doing business with the USA. Mr. Patterson.
Yeah, we have to make sure that we are dealing in facts. So one has to make sure we have the facts, and we have to ensure that we're very diplomatic and can deal with our US partners in a way that makes sense. Because, of course, Jamaica, the majority of our exports go to the US. The majority of our, or almost the majority of our imports come from the US. So we have a strong economic bond with the US that we can't afford to meddle with. What I would propose, though, is that Jamaica takes the lead in moving CARICOM to include Cuba and the rest of the Caribbean in a strong federal arrangement that allows us to no longer have Cuba as an outlier, but having a strong constitutional republic of the Caribbean that includes Cuba and Haiti, and bring all our countries up to a level where the entire 45 million of us can be a strong economy similar to Canada's within the region and stop being small pawns in a very big pond. Jamaica cannot go it alone anymore, nor can any of the other Caribbean countries. If we all come together and integrate as the united independent Caribbean states, we will be able to stand up to even a strong economy such as the Americans.
Is that breaking news, Mr. Patterson, in terms of local media? Is it the first media house in Jamaica that you're indicating that we should become did you say the independent states of the Caribbean?
Yeah, the United Independent Caribbean States. Yeah, so UIC, right, in the Caribbean. So yes, it's breaking news. This is the first channel on which I am saying this publicly. And I strongly advise both of the two colonial parties and the PSOJ to get together and let's have a conversation on how to integrate the region into a strong nation.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. There's so much to unpack there, but not enough time on the morning watch today for that, sir. But very interesting that you shared that. Mr. Cardenas, thank you for joining us in the Love 101 FM studios this morning. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now, sir, would you like to share with us, sir, and if you could maybe speak a little bit more into the microphone, would you like to share with us, sir, just how Cuban residents in Jamaica feel about the recent developments?
Well, I cannot speak for all of them, but Cubans in Jamaica and in general in Cuba and many parts are not surprised because the government of the United States have been hostile to the Cuban Revolution since January 1959. This is part of the campaign to isolate and destroy the Cuban Revolution. It's well known the contribution that Cuba makes in medical assistance to the Third World since 1963. We have been sending thousands of doctors. As a matter of
Mr.
fact,
Cardenas, I'm going to ask to pause for a moment.
Yes.
Do not lose your train of thought. We will return to it after the break. Listeners, please stay with us. We'll be right back on the Morning Watch.
Even more on the go. Discover a new and convenient way to send money abroad with the GK1 app. Download GK1 from the Google Play Store or Apple App Store to send with Western Union today. The time by Grace Kennedy Remittance is...
The time is now 7:15 a.m.
Who did I complain for more? I need some more. Want to do my own thing?
There is not any
There's lamps, LED bulbs, and what more? You cannot afford to miss this deal. Shop and save at the Phosphorus Super Sale, March 19 to March 30, only at Phosphorus. Open Sunday.
Don't let freshness stitch you when you need it the most. Wash your clothes with Downy Softener to keep dazzling everyone around you from day to night. Try Downy Softener now.
In Jamaica, your rights are protected by our Constitution. From the right to education to freedom of expression, every citizen deserves respect and dignity. But remember, with rights come responsibilities. Let's uplift and respect each other and stand against injustice. Together, we can make Jamaica a better place for ourselves and future generations. Know your rights. Embrace your responsibilities. This message was brought to you by the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. We are in the first watch, and we're having a very interesting discussion in relation to the topic. Well, the topic is the Cuba Health Program and Jamaica. In good shape or not? Our guests are Osvaldo Cardenas in studio, President of the Association of Cuban Residents in Jamaica, and we have online Joseph Patterson, President of the United Independence Congress. Just before the break, Mr. Cardenas, you were making a couple of points in relation to how persons here in Cuba feel about the recent developments. We'd like to continue, sir.
Yes, it's here in Cuba and all over the world, because the problem is that the only country where Cuba is accused of that is United States of America. There are tens of countries, including some friends of the United States of America, that support the Cuban medical assistance to several developing countries in the world. Cuba has been congratulated. Cuba has been even proposed for the Nobel Prize. The New York Times and the Washington Post of the United States have congratulated Cuba for the assistance to Africa during Ebola. The former president of the United States, Barack Obama, agreed to cooperate with Cuba in a struggle against Ebola in Africa, because Cuba provided doctors and they were building some provisional hospital or medical facilities, and there was a cooperation between the United States and Cuba approved by the President of the United States. And now they are saying that these people are human trafficking. Was Barack Obama involved in human trafficking? The New York Times and the Washington Post were supporting human trafficking. The governments of all over the world, the organization, the World Health Organization, the OPS, all these organizations have supported Cuba through years. The governments of all the countries, the thousands of people, the millions of people that Cuba has saved. This is so horrible, and all because they are opposed to the government, and because they think that that program is so positive that project a positive view on Cuba. That is what this is all about. 35,000 Jamaicans have been taken care this year only for the doctors in the eyes. So nobody in Jamaica believes those nonsense unless it's somebody that is hostile to the Cuban political system. That is a different thing. If you are hostile to a political system and you want to accuse them of something, it's a different story. This is all about politics. This is nothing about health. They don't care about the health of the people. They don't care about the health of the children, the health of the elderly, and the health of the population in general.
We have heard it loud and clear, Mr. Cardenas. I refer to a bit of, well, this is some information here from the dialogue, and it speaks to leadership for the Americas. It's dated August the 4th, 2020, and it asks the question, which is a title, is the government of Cuba exploiting medical workers? And interestingly, it makes reference to, at the time, U.S. Senator Rick Scott, of Florida, and Marco Rubio, Republican Florida, Rick Scott, and Marco Rubio, Republican Florida, and Ted Cruz, Republican Texas. And it speaks to the medical program, Cuba. And it makes reference to the annual trafficking in persons report. It then goes on to read, what does Cuba's doctors program consist of, and how important is it for Cuba in terms of both diplomacy and revenue inflows? And it goes on to read a couple of things. Among them, it makes reference to the billions of dollars that the Cuban government raises from this program. In fact, it says Cuba generates between $8 billion and $11 billion every year. And it reads this. This is what the report, this is what is written here, sir. It's not me saying it or Love FM saying it. It's what is here in the document. Between $8 billion and $11 billion every year from the forced labor of doctors and medical workers exported to foreign countries. And the forced labor description is not mine, according to the writer. It is the U.S. State Department's language in its most recent trafficking persons report to the U.S. Congress, and it makes reference to a couple of other things as well. Do you have any response to that?
Definitely. First of all, in that report, and Mr. Rubio, who has never visited Cuba or had never met with the Cuban doctors abroad, the Cuban doctors that are working, he met with a Cuban doctor that had went to the United States asking for asylum or asking for a better life. But he had never visited a place where the real Cuban doctors are working or spoke with any of them. Now,
a quick one, sir, only because of time.
Yes.
What is your response in relation to those who have gone on the program, not saying Jamaica, no, but the program exists in other countries as well. Those who have been on the program and then they have, as it were, left the program. Some might say defected. Any reactions to that?
Well, in Cuba, education is free from primary school to university. All of those people were educated for free in Cuba.
Okay.
They left their country to have a better life. It's a right.
I'll make reference to I'll make reference to another document, only because of time. Human Rights Foundation, which is a non-partisan foundation which reports on matters in various countries according to how they describe themselves. HRF report, Human Trafficking in Cuba's Medical Missions, New York, August 22, 2022. The Human Rights Foundation has published a new report addressing Cuba's state-sponsored, according to this report, state-sponsored human trafficking scheme run through a decades-long program of international medical missions. Since the 1960s, the Cuban regime has sent healthcare personnel to more than 150 countries in what has been referred to as medical diplomacy or humanitarian aid. But it goes on to criticize the program in relation to it engaging in human trafficking, and HRF's new report lays out the current international standards that require states to protect the rights of human trafficking victims and to incorporate a human rights approach when developing trafficking solutions. It also details the history of Cuba's medical missions, the main mechanisms used to exploit the labor of healthcare workers, and how these missions finance the Cuban regime. Lastly, the report outlines potential solutions and policy changes. Sir, it has been alleged, not here necessarily, but I've seen reference elsewhere, that when persons who are doctors from Cuba are working in medical missions in other countries, that a large percentage of their salaries are garnished by the Cuban government. Have you ever heard of that?
All the doctors of Cuba and all the personnel of Cuba that work abroad get their salary in Cuba totally 100% in the first place. Out of the compensation that Cuba gets of providing medical assistance to hundreds of countries during Ebola, during the earthquake.
I want to ask you this. Does the Cuban government actually makes money from this program?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Why not?
Hold that thought 1 second. Because of time, we probably have like 2 minutes left. Mr. Patterson, we have heard from Mr. Cardenas. By the way, Mr. Cardenas, if I'm allowed to, you are the widower of the late Antoinette Horton Cardenas.
Yes, sir.
Yes. And you have been a diplomat for the government of Cuba. To, is it more than one country?
For many years.
For many years. Okay, understood. I just wanted to indicate that for the benefit of the listeners. And of course, I knew Mrs. Horton Cardenas personally, so I met her before. And even though it is some time past, my condolences, sir.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. You're welcome, sir. Mr. Patterson, any further thoughts you want to leave with us before we wrap today, sir? Because we have heard from Mr. Cardenas, but then we have these other issues to deal with at a state level, perhaps. Certainly, in terms of Jamaica's trafficking in persons index, we must be concerned. Any thoughts you want to leave with us, sir, before we ask Mr. Cardenas to make any other comments, if he has any further to make?
Sure. Just my condolences as well, my brother Cardenas. Really sorry about your loss. As for the diplomatic situation we have, Jamaica has to be very careful about how it plays. We truly appreciate what the Cubans have done for us. I'm sure Jamaica has benefited immensely from the support we've received from Cuba. But the accusations that are being made against Cuba needs to be carefully understood. And we have to do so within the context of our relationship with our trading partners. And on top of that, we also have to look into our own affairs as to how well are we dealing with our nurses and doctors who are indigenous to Jamaica, and ensuring that we're doing what we need to do to keep, to retain, and to properly compensate our own nurses and our own doctors. And beyond that, we need to move to an integrated Caribbean. And for example, one thing we could do now is give all of our Cuban workers Jamaican citizenship, and so that they can be free to live and work in Jamaica as Jamaicans, and not in any way be constrained by what might or might not be going on with the Cuban government in terms of the accusation made against them.
Very interesting, Mr. Patterson. And I'm just sort of wondering how you made the leap between discussing the issue of the program to an integrated Caribbean, or is it just something that you think will be one of the many things to cure the problem? I don't know how you want to respond to that.
It will certainly help, because the long-standing rift between Cuba and America can be solved by Cuba becoming a free and fair country, one where the government does not have the kind of control over citizens that they currently have. Make Cuba a free republic that's a part of a republic of the Caribbean, and the problem goes away, because America could not continue to demonize Cuba and oppress Cuba in the way that they have if the Cuban government should release the Cuban people from the dictatorship of communism and give them a free and fair society, similar to what we have in other Caribbean countries like Jamaica. And for us in Jamaica to move even further to ensure good governance and spread that across the Caribbean, and be a strong 45 million people country to face the rest of the world.
Very interesting, Mr. Patterson. I suppose there'll be some persons in Cuba who may or may not like what you just said, because I noticed Mr. Cardenas mentioned the revolution. And Mr. Cardenas, I don't know if you want to make any final comments.
Yes, I want to make a final comment, because it's important to. There have been something read about what the United States says about Cuba, but nothing read about what Cuba says about those things. I want to read something. Since 1963, Cuba has sent more than 600,000 medical missions.
No, I don't think we're disputing the assistance rendered. I think the other concerns are what we are looking at.
Well, if the main concern is that all the Cuban doctors that goes abroad goes voluntarily, they get their salary in Cuba, they get a compensation. In some cases, Cuba get compensation from the countries that can afford, and Cuba, in other cases, Cuba give those services totally free, and during many years give it free, especially to Africa.
I'm getting a signal, but any final thing you want to leave us in terms of Mr. Patterson just said if Cuba became free in terms of it, the way it runs its political affairs, and it was no longer considered an authoritarian regime. Not his word, but that's clearly what he seems to mean. Then, it would remove the problem. I don't know if you want to venture a comment on that.
Well, that is Mr. Patterson's views. That was not the view of Michael Manley when he established this agreement with Fidel Castro.
Hold that
35 years ago.
We are getting a signal. I just wanted to see how best we could include a final comment from you, Mr. Cardenas. We're completely and totally out of time. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us in this first watch, Mr. Patterson and Mr. Cardenas. So much more to unpack on this topic. Listeners, thank you for being with us in this segment. Stay with us. We'll be right back on the Morning Watch.
The time by Jam Bank is
7:33 a.m.
It's time to twist and win with Coca-Cola. Enter for a chance to win a magical travel experience. Carnival costumes, TVs, earbuds, and so much more. Entering is easy. Just purchase any Coca-Cola with a white cap. WhatsApp the code under the cap to 876-214-5756. And that's it. Visit us on Instagram at Recico Hub or Coca-Cola Jamaica for more information. It's time to twist and win with Coca-Cola.
Breeze. Imagine getting home after a long day and it smells so amazing that it makes you smile. Try Febreze Plus, an air freshener that delivers continuous scent for up to 50 days when you plug it in low mode. Indulge in wonderful scents for weeks with Febreze.
Jamaica and its workforce are advancing quickly. Life-changing opportunities are arising. You need training and support. We are the Renewed Heart NSTA Trust, committed to providing new and emerging skills training and opportunities. Come to Heart. We'll help you claim your place in the workforce of the future.
Sharing the experience at Montana Pharmacy. We have a wide variety of items in store just for you. Fill your prescriptions while you shop. And senior citizens enjoy 10% off. Shop household, cosmetics, toys, and many other departments. We also offer curbside pickup and delivery. Visit our website at fontanapharmacy.com. Fontana Pharmacy, where it's all good inside.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. Let's take a look now at the newspapers to see what Jamaicans and others are saying and doing. And we have in the Gleaner, there's a headline that reads Moldy Mess. Moldy Mess. And it goes on to read the presence of mold in the four main operating theaters of the Kingston Public Hospital, KPH, is one factor delaying their reopening after a malfunctioning air conditioning system forced their closure more than a month ago. And we turn now to Loop Jamaica News. New OPM portfolio not modeled after US Doge PM. And we have in the Daily Observer, Marks, referring to Senator Audrey Marks, former Jamaican ambassador to the United States of America. Marks ready to cut red tape. New minister focused on moving Jamaica into world's ease of doing business top 5. That story by Jason Cross. Those and many other stories in our various news sources. Coming up next, we'll read for you some of the feedback or share with you some of the feedback from our Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp question, which is, what should be Jamaica's response to the USA? Read the Cuban Health Program. If you haven't done so yet, leave your responses on our Facebook or YouTube. Love 1FM Jamaica Live, and also WhatsApp comments and voice notes to 876-9973-125 using the hashtag The Morning Watch. We'll be right back.
Revelation 1 verse 14 describes Jesus' hair as being white like wool, as white as snow. Is this literally or figuratively so? Does like wool suggest that Jesus also had dark skin and eyes? Daniel also described Jesus as having hair like wool. But yet, we still think of it as symbolism. Does he have to have one specific color, or can he be the color we each see him as? Tuesday, March 18, on The Rock. Join guests Pastor Dane Wilson and Pastor Silburn Carr as they discuss the topic, Jesus, red, yellow, black, or white. That's The Rock, Tuesday, March 18 at 10 a.m. right here on the family station, Love 101.
Oh my God, it's you sound.
He's right. And they represent what? Youth Sound. Listen for Youth Sounds on Wednesdays at 4:15 p.m. as youths from the Jamaica Baptist Union discuss issues affecting youths and giving their youthful input on the happenings of the day.
Youth Sounds is brought to you by the Jamaica Baptist Union. It is a program of the Jamaica Baptist Union Youth Department.
Youth Sounds every Wednesday at 4:15 p.m. on the family station. Love 101. Youth Sounds.
Youth Sounds?
When you read the Youth Sounds. Youth Sounds. You don't know it's Youth Sounds.
Youth Sounds.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. Now for responses to our social media question, what should be Jamaica's response to the USA? Read the Cuban Health Program. Do you call any responses?
I do have some responses. This one from Cherry in Spanish Town says, in reference to the Cuban medical program, whatever the government does, it has to look on the humanitarian side of it and the benefit to us in Jamaica, Cuba, and the Caribbean. It is high time we in the Caribbean come together as one and train our doctors and nurses in ways that programs can run within and be of good service with excellent salaries, as this is one of the main reasons for migration of the medical field. Monica says, of all the countries in the Caribbean, Jamaica has benefited the most from the Cuban medical services. We don't see the same level of assistance from the USA. Medical costs are extremely expensive, so many people, especially the poor, have benefited. What will happen to these persons? A large number of Jamaican doctors and nurses were recruited by the same USA and migrated, and our health sector is now so put down. Just go to any public hospital. Even the private ones are struggling to retain their nurses. And not seeing a name for this one. Oh, Ivy Harvey. Ivy says, things have changed with the Cuba-Jamaica program from what it started out to be. Example, at the fish clinic in Papine, and the treatment of eye patients was free. It is not anymore. That's a fact. Why the change? So yeah, those are our responses.
Interesting. Well, we get right into the second watch. And Member of Parliament Julian Robinson made his presentation recently in the budget debate in his capacity in terms of being the opposition spokesperson with responsibility for finance. and it follows the Minister of Finance's contribution, of course, that being the Honorable Favour Williams. Now, last week we, on the Morning Watch, the co-host, the other host, last week examined her speech, Reverend Dr. Dylan Toussaint. Now, this week, let's do the same, but in relation to Member of Parliament Julian Robinson's contribution. We have as our guest for this segment, Dr. Andre Houghton. He's an economist, and he's also the opposition spokesperson for science, technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And we have also, for this segment, Joseph Patterson. He was with us in the first watch. He's with us in the second watch. Of course, Mr. Patterson, President of the United Independence Congress, the UIC, and he is the UIC's spokesperson on finance. So good morning again, Mr. Patterson. Mr. Patterson, good morning again. Good morning, Dr. Houghton. Dr. Houghton.
Yeah, I'm here. Good morning. Good morning to you, Sir Patterson. Good morning as well to your listeners. How is the morning today?
It's fine, sir.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Houghton. Of course, welcome. Thank you for coming back to just to be with us this morning, Mr. Patterson. Now, if I could just jump right into it, what stood out, gentlemen, to the both of you, or what might have fallen flat in Mr. Robinson's contribution? Might I start with you, Dr. Houghton? What were some of the things that you thought stood out that made his speech very impactful and that spoke directly to the average Jamaican person, not only the man in the street, but the small business operator, the large entrepreneur, or the large business person?
And I'm very happy that you asked what stood out to me.
Yes.
Because so many things that Julian spoke about will make so great impact on the Jamaican economy. First, before we discuss his presentation, we have to put Jamaica into context, right? Jamaica faces a low growth, low tech, low wage economy. And we have been saying this from the onset. The government had in mind that they wanted the economy to grow by 5% in 4 years, which are supposed to happen by 2019. Fast forward 9 years later, the country is growing by -1%. So we face some fundamental structural issues that need addressing, right? And the first thing that Julian said is that like how Jamaica is giving the Chinese and other foreigners 5-year tax break, why not give the domestic companies some tax break as well? We met with the Small Business Association, and they said that 2 years tax break would be good for them. But we are saying that in the initial stage of a company, when they're in that incubator stage, they need some time for them to grow first before they start paying taxes. So one of the things that the People's National Party will be doing is that we'll be giving these new companies 3 years tax break so that they can build up their company before they start paying taxes. And I think that's profound. Can you hear me?
Dr. Houghton, we're hearing you loud and clear, but we are already upon a break, so hold the thought. You're talking about 3-year tax break for
all MSMEs in Jamaica.
Hold that thought, sir. And of course, Mr. Patterson, we're going to get your comments as well. Listeners, please stay with us. We'll be right back on the Morning Watch.
Time on Love 101 is now 7:45 a.m.
Jamaica, the national budget is here, and it affects you, your family, your future, your community. It's all connected. Now is the time to get informed and get involved. How will this year's budget impact your daily life? What opportunities and changes are ahead? Tune in on Tuesday, March 11, as the Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, presents the central government budget for fiscal year 2025-2026. The national budget is everybody's business. Jamaica, this is your future. Be a part of it. Visit nof.gov.jm for details.
Mama work hard, for real. She do the most to send me and my brother go school. So, the dream was always to go to university. Well, I fulfilled 2 dreams with 1 Jane Bank savings plan, you know. Further my education, and I make mama proud.
Wishing you could. With your Jane Bank savings, you absolutely can. Jane Bank will help you find a way.
In Jamaica, your rights are protected by our Constitution. From the right to education to freedom of expression, every citizen deserves respect and dignity. But remember, with rights come responsibilities. Let's uplift and respect each other and stand against injustice. Together, we can make Jamaica a better place for ourselves and future generations. Know your rights. Embrace your responsibilities. This message was brought to you by the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs.
Ready to experience 6 times more freshness in your clothes? Try Downy Scent Beads. Its fragrance is so amazing, you'll have to sniff it to believe it. Try Downy Scent Beads today. 6 times more freshness versus using detergent alone.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. We are in the second watch, and the topic is examining the opposition's contribution to the 2025-2026 budget debate. Our guests are Dr. Andre Horton and Joseph Patterson. Dr. Horton being an economist and opposition spokesperson, entrepreneurship, technology, innovation. We have Joseph Patterson, president of the United Independence Congress, spokesperson on finance. And Dr. Horton, just before the break, you are speaking to what you found impactful about Julian Robinson's presentation, Member of Parliament, the Honorable Julian Robinson, what you found memorable about his presentation or impactful. And just a correction, you are the opposition spokesperson on science, technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. My humble apologies. And you were also speaking to a couple of other things, such as the tax break that we need for the MSME sector. You said you made reference to them asking for 2 years tax break, and you're saying that PNP is actually saying it should be 3 years. Continue, Dr. Horton.
No, I'm not hearing you guys again.
Oh, Dr. Horton, I was just reminding the listeners of what you said just before the break, etc. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, man, I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Please continue your train of thought, sir.
Yeah, so the tax break is one, and that's how we're planning to assist these small businesses, and that's very important because it's going to allow them to hold their capital and to reinvest that capital in the business so that these businesses can grow. And that's how economies grow, right? Economies grow when we facilitate business development and business growth. And that's one thing that stood out to me. Another thing was the flat rate for water for the elders. I went to St. Kitts. I'm working on a water project down there for their government. They also have a flat rate for their senior citizens. And I think this is very important.
Interesting.
Another good thing that Julian spoke about was his stance on agriculture. How we plan to boost the agricultural industry, how we plan to use science and technology and to infuse our ability and our understanding of when to grow, how to grow, why to grow, and what to grow. Because Jamaica relies so much on the agricultural sector that facilitating its growth is going to be very important. Another thing that he spoke about is technology. How we're going to infuse technology into our other industries. Very important. We need digitalization. We need broadband coverage. Another thing is renewable energy. We need cheaper energy. The only way Jamaica can manufacture more, or the only way Jamaica can attract big business, is if we can give them cheaper energy. So we're looking at how to reduce the kilowatt hour cost from 40 cents to about 20 cents. And that too is achievable. So he spoke about so many things, and I must say kudos for Julian for going there and for making the best of it to demonstrate to Jamaica exactly what the PNP has planned for them in the right direction.
Interesting. Thank you, Dr. Horton. And Mr. Patterson, your thoughts, sir?
Sure. Your question was what I found impactful in the presentation of Mr. Robinson,
or what stood out,
and what stood out.
Yes.
What stood out to me is that the PNP still does not understand and appreciate the impact it has had in a negative way on the Jamaican people over the 18 and a half years straight that it had in office. I think he should have opened the presentation with an apology for what they have done to the Jamaican people.
I think that's a very unfair statement, Mr. Patterson.
Sorry?
Come on.
Let's
unfair statement. We haven't been in power since when? In 2013, 2011?
Doctor, let him finish and then comment after. But if finish your thought, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Stokeley. Much appreciated. So given what they have achieved or failed to achieve over those 18 and a half years, plus the time that Simpson Miller was in office, plus the fact that they're an 87-plus-year-old party, they really should be coming to the Jamaican people with something far more substantive than what they have. What Jamaica needs now more than anything else is good governance, and what they're giving us are just more vote-buying gimmicks. I mean, the issues raised by Mr. Robinson,
let me ask you, let me intervene one moment. Why do you say vote-buying gimmicks? Elaborate.
Yes. So whether he's talking about agriculture or flat rates on water or cheaper energy or tax breaks, the bottom line is that they have had enough time to have proven their capacity to do these things, and they have failed to do them. So now they have a credibility issue. So they have to restore credibility, not by simply listing out nice sounding ideas. For example, the flat rate idea is a nice sounding idea, which will not work because you're going to have what their government normally creates, which are programs which cost us a lot of money but doesn't produce the dividends.
What would a UIC government posit? What would a UIC government put forward?
Sure. So the first thing a UIC government would do is to eliminate the $100 billion in corruption costs that the Jamaican people are suffering from. That can provide $400,000 to basic schools.
It's easy to say that, but what you mean? Make it more granular. What exactly would you do?
Oh, well, first of all, you have to have a system of good governance. So you have to find out why is it that Jamaica continues to suffer from high degrees of corruption, because a lot of this 1.26 trillion budget, much of it is going to be wasted or stolen in one form or the other. So here's what we have to do. We have to ensure that we have proper checks and balances in government. That means we have to remove the system we now have and replace it with something much better, which the UIC has articulated. Now, let's talk about this idea.
Can you give us a list, only because of time? Is there a list of things that you would have put in such a speech if you were doing the budget speech, sir?
Yeah, for example, we have to ensure we have an elected Senate, which is separate from the House of Representatives. We have to ensure we have a separate executive, which can be held accountable by the
those are sort of structural things.
That's what I'm saying. If we don't fix the structural things, all we're going to have are these election vote buying gimmicks, which nice statements. But at the end of the year, like what happened with the previous government, they promised us 5% growth in 4 years. We have not seen it. They promised us to be able to sleep with our windows and doors open. We're not seeing it. They promised us to have the best roadworks in the world. We're not seeing it. They promised us. So all these promises which come at election time and in budgets mean nothing if at the end of the day, the majority of Jamaicans are living in a country which is generally unsafe, generally unclean, generally disorderly, and one where we cannot live, earn, and retire with dignity in our own country. So we keep losing the best and brightest to migration because they're running away from an environment which is not conducive. That's why we have Cuban nurses and doctors, because we have lost our nurses and doctors. So we have to fix the underlying problems.
If I could just raise one with you, would you have any issue with a tax break for new MSMEs?
I have all of the nice sounding things. For example, tax breaks for SMEs, from the government side, expanding the threshold for PAYE. All of those are nice sounding things. But here's the underlying problem. If you have a high inflationary environment, it wipes out all of the gains. If you have an insecure country, small business cannot operate properly to be very productive. So if you don't fix the underlying problems, these nice sounding gimmicks will be just that, gimmicks to win votes, but the country is still left in the condition it was 10 years ago and before.
Dr. Horton, you've heard Mr. Patterson, your comments. You were certainly intervening at a point when he mentioned 18 years.
Yeah, man. I think that he's falling into the JLP's trap of blaming the PNP. And it's quite unfortunate because if you really examine Percival James Patterson's tenure as a Prime Minister, I think he has been the best outside of Michael Manley. The best infrastructure. When you talk about creating infrastructure, when you talk about roads, when you talk about schools, when you talk about putting Jamaica on the right developmental path, that was Percival James Patterson.
So I don't know what your doctor, your number one would be Michael Manley.
Yeah, and then Percival James Patterson.
Second,
but the issue, you know,
I just wanted to know. I just wanted to get that.
Yeah, man, Michael Manley is the reason why I joined the PNP. I've been reading him since I was going into high school, and even though he didn't execute how he wanted to, he had the philosophy of thought of a modern leader that Jamaica really needs at this time. Now, fast forward to now. Looking back at Julian's presentation, there's a lot in it that is long-term and that is going to push the country forward. Take energy, for example. Jamaica has suffered because of this, and I know that the People's National Party was in power for 18 years up to 2002. That was like 20-odd years ago. Things and times change. As a matter of fact, we were the ones who opened the telecoms industry so that when you have a phone call, you can make calls and use 2 phone calls yourself. That was a groundbreaking intervention that the People's National Party through Philip Paulwell was able to execute. Telecommunications is very similar to energy, right? You need to increase the competition. You need to facilitate growth in the inputs in the industry and also to make sure that people are getting the end product at a cheaper price. Economic conditions change every year. Therefore,
in terms of what Mr. Patterson made mention of, in terms of inflation, how would a PNP government?
Inflation is a central bank problem. When you talk about targeting inflation, it's the central bank who is responsible for targeting inflation through their interest rate and the other policies.
And the government, and the government
plays a role through their
Can I jump in at this point?
Let me finish. The government plays a role in how they allow economies to produce cheaper goods that also contributes to inflation. And one way countries can produce cheaper goods is if the government can provide cheaper energy. Also, when you talk about inflation, you have to talk about the import content of our basket, because a lot of what we import comes at a cost, and this feeds into the domestic cost. So if we are looking at export-led growth, we are looking at increased domestic output, then obviously we are looking at how to curtail inflation. The Bank of Jamaica must recognize that there is a job that they need to do. Whenever we're in a recession, they need to reduce interest rates. And whenever we want to spur domestic investment, we need cheaper cost of capital. That is where Mr. Patterson needs to go and to speak about the government at hand and don't talk about
Doctor, we're totally out of time, but you wanted to respond, Mr. Patterson. 3 seconds, literally 3 seconds.
Sure. The JLP and the PNP gave away the Central Bank of Jamaica and therefore gave up their responsibility for managing inflation to the Central Bank.
Leave it there. That sounds like a different topic, Mr. Patterson, that we probably need to consider having at another time. But it's a very interesting discussion, gentlemen. Mr. Patterson and Dr. Horton, thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts this morning. Thank you for being with us on the Morning Watch. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And thank you, listeners, for being with us. Join us again tomorrow as we look at other topical and controversial issues. And of course, visit our Love 101 FM YouTube channel and Facebook page, and now TikTok at Love 101 FM Jamaica for this and all other Love 101 FM programs. And of course, download our app and stay connected to us, the family station, Love 101 FM, the #1 gospel station in Jamaica. Thanks to our producer, Kathy Gale, and to our guests. And join me tomorrow as we look at other issues of the day. I am Stokeley Marshall, handing it back to Love in the Morning with Chicago.
The Ministry of Health and Wellness works to ensure the provision of quality health services and promotes healthy lifestyles and environmental practices for all Jamaicans. The time by the Ministry of Health and Wellness is
8:01 a.m. and you are now invited to listen to